Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Dennis, and I serve as Executive Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. It is a joy to welcome you to tonight's resident talk. Sitka is located at Cascade Head on the north central Oregon coast and resides on the unceded traditional lands of the indigenous people now represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. There's so much to learn. Just one step we can all take, especially when we're planning a trip to Sitka and the Oregon coast, is to visit the Grand Ronde Chalu Museum and Cultural Center. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the first of tonight's residents, Hannah Krafcik. Hannah Krafcik is a Portland-based neuroqueer artist. Through all their making, they rely on their productivity for pattern recognition to locate connections, cultivate language, and build relationships. Hannah has been taking dance classes since they were 5 years old as a way to satiate their sensory needs and body-mind curiosities. Their tendency towards sensorial inquiry continues to be a central facet of their work. Their ever-growing list of practices includes performance, photography, new media, and arts journalism. Hannah often makes performances and teaches in collaboration with artistic partner Emily Jones. Together, the two build intimate sensorial choreographies, exploring tensions between social power dynamics and unnamed personal needs. Welcome to Sitka, Hannah.
Hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Hannah Krafcik. I am living on land that has been stewarded by Cowlitz, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Clackamas, and many other tribes, also known as Portland, Oregon. I'm a transdisciplinary artist, so that means that I work a lot between mediums, and I often find myself sort of straddling the dichotomies of the performing arts world and the visual arts world. And I would say my dance and movement practice is the golden thread. It's the thing I keep coming back to. It's the lens that I filter a lot of my other work through, that is more or less time-based, I would say, less ephemeral. I'm non-binary. For me, that means I don't feel like a man or woman. For me, that means I feel like an amoeba most of the time. And I just want to offer sort of my own definition of being neuroqueer. I'm a neurodivergent person, so I'm autistic, and among other things, and I'm queer. And those two feelings feel very inseparable for me. They're super related in ways that maybe I have a few words for, but mostly don't. In this political climate, it feels kind of dangerous to name that overlap and intersection, but I also think it's really important. And it's something that is coming to light, and there's more attention being drawn to that, for better, for worse. And I feel in a place where I'm safe enough to talk about that intersection of experience. I read a really cool article while I was at Sitka called Intra-Actions, and it was like an interview with physicist and philosopher scholar Karen Barad and Adam Kleinman. And I just wanted to, I'm not going to read this whole section of stuff, but I did want to offer a little quote, and you can screenshot this and save it for later if you like. But it's this place where Karen is talking about the implications of putting oneself at risk and troubling oneself, one's ideas, one's dreams, all the different ways of touching and being touched and sensing differences and entanglements from within. I love this part. Karen says, "In fact, touch currently has me in its grip. I find it very fruitful to understand the history of physics as the history of an inquiry into the nature of touch." I wanted to offer some possible intersections with my own work, things I'm curious about, things I work with as I'm making work. I am curious about the slipperiness between sensory-seeking behavior, especially common and neurodivergent experience, sensuality, and sexual expression. I'm always curious about pattern recognition, and for me, this also means allowing many meanings to enter into my experience of something and to allow meaning making to occur. And I'm very interested in boundaries, continuums, and power dynamics always, and how what I do with my body shapes who I am. I wanted to share a video with you that I made. All right, here we go. Okay. So I was not able to get my film photos that I took scanned in time for this artist talk. I'm still waiting for them. But the images that you saw, I took with my phone. When I was making this with this like familiar device of like screen share, writing things out to explain something I've seen like other artists do, like someone I know, Sidonie O'Neill, and also in media and like anime and things like that, I was thinking about how it also kind of reflects how many applications I wrote while I was at Sitka, which is quite a lot, actually. I'm always applying for things. And also, our cohort joked a lot about the difficulty of titling our work. And I feel like there's some of that reflected in here. I wanted to share that when it comes to load, the solo that is made mostly with a kettlebell, I've been sort of remapping scrambled connections in my body after getting surgery to remove endometriosis. That was like really awful and causing me all kinds of pain and inhibition in my dance practice and daily life. I started feeling ready to like lift weights again. And I was using weights one day and I picked up my phone and I was surprised by how light it felt when I was holding it. And I sort of got curious about this idea again of like what I do with my body and that how that changes who I am and might change who I am in unexpected ways. I find the stimulation of this kind of added load or like dead weight, I guess, supports me in my own proprioceptive ability and helps me locate myself in space. So this work kind of, yeah, it hinges on my consent. So I'm not trying to do anything that like pushes an edge or causes me sort of like any performative harm, and just centering my own self-determination and criticality and just like practice. And then I wanted to give you one more quote from Karen Barad, and I want to invite it to be sort of read as poetics rather than theory. She says, "But what if the point isn't to widen the bounds of inclusion to let everyone and everything in? What if it takes sensing the abyss, the edges of the limits of inclusion and exclusion before the binary of inside, outside, inclusion, exclusion, mattering, not mattering, can be seriously troubled? What if it is only in facing the inhuman, the indeterminate non being of mattering and not mattering, that an ethics committed to the rupture of indifference can arise?" And yeah, here's my information. And thank you so much. That's the end.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for taking us inside your residency and your practice. So our next presenter, Jory Mickelson, is a writer, educator, and storyteller. They are the author of Picturing All This Divide and Wilderness Kingdom, which won a 2020 High Plains Book Award. Their work has appeared in Poetry Northwest, Harvard Divinity Bulletin, Mid-American Review, the Rumpus, and other journals in the US, Canada, and the UK. They are the recipient of an Academy of American Poets Prize and have received fellowships from Deer Butte, the Desert Rat Writers Residency, the Lambda Literary Foundation, and the Helen Wurlitzer Foundation of New Mexico. They were also a 2022 Jack Straw writer in the Jack Straw Cultural Center's Writers Program, but now they are with the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. So please join me in welcoming Jory to Sitka.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for everyone who showed up. I'm in Bellingham, Washington, and it's a rainy afternoon after a cloudy but dry morning. So I hope your weather is a little bit better than ours. I wanted to read a poem from my book Picturing, which is just out this January, it from a publisher in Canada called End of the Line Press. And if you are interested in getting the book, you can order it from there. And it's called "A Husband Abandons His Wife to the Noted Female Paleontologist in Order to Continue His Tour of the Continents." And this poem is based on the 2020 film Ammonite that is set in 1840s England. And the plot of the film speculates on a romantic relationship involving a noted female paleontologist of the time who is hired to care for the ailing wife of a visitor who is Kate Winslet. And so I'll read the poem. Late at night, I grind the ash, then scrape it into the ink to fix the picture better to the page. It is raining, and I am overcome. The sound of water from rag to bucket, rag to floor and back, the wooden shore of my scouring, my body disregarded so long as it can work. Of his wife, I took no notice except her eyes, the color of beryl. It was something or nothing. Even when the work is done, you must work to keep the tools bright. Tide mark, white dressing gown, candlelight beneath the door, what a woman is permitted to do alone. Off the shore, I go plunging into salt. I come up gasping. What if, more than a person, it's about movement toward each other? It is satisfying to be in her mind, an interiority like swimming, though the swimmer never outlasts the sea. Let her impression of me last beyond my meaning. Surely there are older forms of desire because animals are beautifully made. The sea breaks itself on the rocks. Her big dark legs lead her body toward me. If pleasure is an ending, then surely we are joined. I did my best to capture her, worry I won't have time to finish. Nothing must come of this, I tell her. The sun, far out over the water, shining, must be enough. My time at Sitka, I was really aware of the ocean. I live in Bellingham, which is, being from a landlocked state, we were told is the bay, it's not the ocean. And so, when I was at Sitka and I would go into Lincoln City and I would actually be on the ocean with waves and everything. And so a lot of that landscape has slowly started to work its way into the poems I was writing. And so at Sitka, I'm working on a book length manuscript. It's a book length poem about a famous 20th century artist. And some of the natural images from Sitka and around started to work their way into my poems. And so these are untitled because they're sections of a book length poem. And so I'll just read the next poem. This happened. This happened, the bullet entered, my blood harboring out, inferior vena cara a vein, a vine, a branching tree felled. One lung, paper nest wet with collapse, my stomach's gastric acid eddied in my chest, intestines split, spilled their contents, spleen wrecked like a season passed on. I still think I'm dead days later. The hospital bed's a white meadow. My fever rises over the red trees. Another poem that I drafted while I was I was taken by the beach, and this artist lived on the East Coast, so I had to transfer a lot of the sensory details to the East Coast. So this one's Isn't It Touching? Isn't it touching? And by touching, I mean I'm touching you. I've never been big on nature. It's dirty. My finger is pressed to the center of your breastbone. Do locals or tourists call this the beach or the shore? I can't remember. I stand on the boardwalk surrounded by various anonymous gulls, and we all watch the wind sort its way across the sand. I've always been more for the park. I mean, amusements. Well, not the rides, but the food. You can't get a hot dog like this anywhere but Coney Island. Old women in knitted caps and rumpled clothes, the clams, the endless gorgeousness of signage and rough trade. In the air, you can smell the cotton candy being made. It's intimate, isn't it? The details, how if you really look, the world draws close, the wind brushes against your hand. One of the things about working between mediums is both my parents are visual artists. And so I have early training in the visual arts, and trying to translate visual art into poetry is an interesting conundrum for me, because sometimes I'll even look at the process for creating the art and try and create new forms like a sonnet or a villanelle. Like, how would I translate the artist process for making the work? And so one of the really crazy and fun things is, I can just tell you who the artist is. It's Andy Warhol. He, in his famous pictures of Elvis, where you see the repeated image of Elvis as a gunslinger, at his first showing of these, he just sent the roll of canvas to the gallery. And they said, "What do you want us to do with this?" And he said, "Just cut it wherever and put it on stretchers and hang it." So like he was so far removed from the art at this point that he told the gallery, he's like, "You decide what the pictures are and how big they should be." And so his largest of the Elvises is 11 Elvises, and it was created that way because it covered the whole wall of the gallery. So it was built for the dimensions of the gallery, not by the specifications of the artist. And so I was like, how would I turn this into a form? And so my form, 11 Elvises, is 11 lines long, and the end word on every line is a rhyme or near rhyme of the word that comes before it at the end of each line. So just like a silk screen isn't quite the same as every other print that comes after it for a Warhol, so too like the end words slightly shift. And so this is 11 Elvises is the form. My poverty, the early death, the squalor, it stifled me. The dull rock sunk at center sent out ripples for a lifetime. So I left, became shallow as a puddle from a late spring rain, the kind that makes a dog nuzzle every bit of garbage and flower in Central Park, the emerald of summer almost upon the trees, city filled with couples racing home to fuck. Here I write my own fable by erasing words from the page, the blankness rumpled by my vigorous rubbing. At the edges, I apply gold leaf until from every angle I'm gilt. Then the blotted line I'm known for, my charming illustration of the world. And I'm going to read you a final poem. I was commissioned to write a poem about one of the beings that inhabits the Rocky Mountains, and I chose the ponderosa pine, or Pinus ponderosa, which I did not see at Sitka, but lives like from British Columbia down to Mexico, from the coast all the way to the Dakotas. And so it has a huge range. And I went through some really terrible drafts at my time at Sitka, and then I took a terrible draft home with me and continued to revise it. So here we are, ponderosa pine. Big heavy in August's heat, I lay under your shade, cushioned by the resinous vanilla scented duff of your needles, looking up into the tufted canopy of tri-bundled needles. I ponder the generations you have fed and sheltered, maybe 300 or 600 years. I rest with the blue and spruce grouse lining their nest with your needles, burrow with the porcupines and mice who have shredded your bark into bedding, grow wings, gliding with grosbeaks, chickadees, and Clark's nutcrackers, or join the chipmunks and squirrels who make off with your seeds. I fall in love again, dance with pine white butterflies, mating in your canopy like lace. Dream myself through your thick puzzle piece bark into your deep roots where blue dye hides for those who know how to make it, your secret sky beneath the earth. So that poem, I wanted to talk about all the biomes that the tree touched on and all the lives that it affected rather than just focusing on the tree. So it really, in my research, sort of expanded around all of the flora and the fauna, even down to insects who used some part of the tree. And the roots are actually, you can make blue dye with which is one of the indigenous uses for the tree in their basket weaving. They use the dye to turn from the roots to turn things blue. So it was sort of a fascinating exploration of a tree I thought I knew pretty well. And I'll leave it with that tonight.
Jory, thank you for reading for us. On a personal set of notes, I love V&Ls and very structured poetry forms, and I grew up on the Jersey Shore, so you totally had me. Our final presenter this evening is Julia Rigby. Julia Rigby is an experimental sound artist, composer, and sculptor who thinks about entanglements among humans and more than humans, phenomena, and sound. She has performed at and composed for Leaf Festival in Lafayette, Colorado, Low End in Omaha, Nebraska, the Toulouse Theater in New Orleans, and the Atlantic Center for the Arts in New Smyrna, Florida. She is a recipient of artist grants from the Center for Cultural Innovation and the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Rigby was the Sound Art and Experimental Music Fellow at the Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts in Omaha, Nebraska in fall 2023. And she is a Sitka resident this year. So please, Sitka community, give a warm welcome to Julia Rigby.
Thank you so much, Allison. Appreciate it. And thank you everybody for being here. I'm so excited to get to hear more about what my cohort has been up to at Sitka and also to share what I've been up to. I actually used my time at Sitka to finish an album. That's what I'm going to talk a little bit about with you today. So I'm a sound artist and I think about sea caves a lot. That's sort of where I like root my practice these days. And I mean, they're magical and there's sort of these portals, like these sites to think about deep time. When you walk into a cave, you're walking into geologic time basically in the way that it's carved out space. And I'm not just thinking about physical space, but I'm thinking about acoustical space and like the sonic signature of the space. Like how has deep time, geologic time created a unique resonant signature? And so I came to Sitka thinking about the cave and wanting to do something about it. And I ended up making a many track album. And this is available on my website. You can view the video, but I just want to start off by showing a little bit of like what I did to create the sounds in the sea cave. Basically, it's a walking cave, and I turn it into a cello by running wire throughout and then bowing the wire with my cello bow. And so it's tensioned on the rock temporarily. It doesn't, leave a mark or leave a trace, but I'm able to take my recorder and record that sonic signature, the rocks. And so I'm going to play a little bit right now for you of this phenomenon happening. Before I show you the album, here's like a little bit of the predecessor, the ancestor to the album, which is this earlier project. Okay, awesome. I'm just gonna pause it right there and I'll share more of it soon enough. But in any case, I wanted to start with that because this the Sea Cave is a site that I've been researching for about 5 years, and it's interesting. It's always changing. Sometimes there are huge storms and sand blows in, and that changes the aperture of the cave in a really interesting way for me. And as aperture shifts, obviously the sound is shifting. And then, sometimes people are writing messages or their names on the rocks. I always think that's fascinating because you have like these time scales in conversation. You have like this human centered sense of time and like why do we need to mark things, and like this like itch we have for permanence and like leaving our mark is like very interesting to me, especially on something that's as old as the sea cave. It's funny, and I think there's something there. And so, this is a large sea cave. It goes far back, like farther back than your physical body can fit. And so part of, what I'm interested in is also like using this wire to like sort of do like a pulse test on like the resonance of those like deep hidden tunnels. You can't see the configuration, but you can sort of hear them through the acoustics. And so that leads me over here to this project, Sea Cave Breathing. I play a lot of pipe organs, and I think about how the pipe organ is like it's an animal with gills. It's like multi-esophageal. It's breathing, it's screaming, it's sighing, it's humming, just like sea caves. And so obviously I had to include a lot of pipe organ in this album. And so I spent my time at Sitka just editing in Ableton what was on here. And I want to play a little bit of my overture for you to give you an idea into how I've, as an arranger, how I'm working like my compositions from the sea cave. You're hearing birds, you're hearing the water, you're hearing the resonance, and then some amazing talented musicians who I asked to be part of this and turn it into an opera. And then so trying to, blend all of these elements together and make something that's still centering the sea cave, but also touching on like global issues of change and environmental relationships. So I'm gonna play a little bit of the overture right now for you. Okay. I skipped ahead a little bit because I wanted you to hear the pipe organ because it's a bit of a slow build. With the last bit of my time, I just want to share a little bit about, my process with arranging the album and what I was doing at Sitka. Because for me, Sitka was really, it was a quiet, deep reflection period where it's just like me and the elk and my wonderful cohort really thinking about what this was about. And so I just want to walk through the sketch of all of these tracks here. You know, there is a dirge on this track, track 18, dirge for the insects. I do think about, well, pipe organs traditionally have been used to like help usher people through like passages of life, funeral processions. They're not even today very like rarely secularized. And so I thought I should honor that with the dirge. And I was thinking about climate grief, climate anxiety, and you have something hyperlocal like the sea cave I've been researching, and then you have something global, a global phenomena like the collapse of insect biodiversity across the world with all of those very scary implications. But you know, I wanted to take a moment to honor that grief on the pipe organ and also connect like the local sea cave to a larger global phenomenon, because the phenomena that affect the sounds and the visuals in this cave are all related to those that affect these larger patterns of loss and change that are happening in our era. And I also was thinking about taking a moment to think about like loss and grief, but also uncertainty and hope and renewal. And so a lot of the score is very triumphant almost. It's like I look at it as a like not a call to action, but like a reflection on like hope. And so there's a track in here about the Swainson's thrush, which migrates at night. I just thought that line itself of like factual knowledge was a poem. And there's a whole track in here about sea star ambulation and tube feet. And because I'm also very interested in like listening to the little guys, listening to aquatic invertebrates, and you know, who's crawling around in our tide pools, and like why do they belong in an opera? I think they do. I think sea stars should be in operas, in my personal opinion. Obviously, frogs and cicadas should be in operas. Their bats are in here. There's a golden lion tamarin who just starts screaming at the beginning of this very chaotic segment. It's supposed to be unpleasant. It's a piece about anxiety. And so the tamarin is titled in this track. A lot of these tracks have the names of performers who were in the work, who are all listed down below. And Bruised Piano, just want to mention, that is a piece that I recorded on a very, very out of tune, very damaged piano. And I like to work with traumatized instruments a lot and like basically like sonify something that really has been through the ringer. So that piano makes a very like strange sound for track 5, which hopefully you will all get a chance to listen to and enjoy. I just want to thank all of you so much for being here. My email is on my website. Shout out anytime. Thank you so much.
Julia, thank you so much for sharing your compositions and your work and your practice and your residency with us. Thank you to Julia and Jory and Hannah for sharing this evening. Good night, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.